I think the governor, I think the governor is right about expanding Medicaid. We need to look at this holistically because none of this happens in a vacuum. And if sequestration were to go out, even though we're expanding Medicaid, and other state departments get cut, there will be increasing pressure on other types of programs that the state of Ohio has, including Medicaid and Medicare, including Social Security when it comes to some of the disability costs, that come from the cuts. The cuts, you cannot cut your way out of this problem without dealing with the revenue side of things. So what can they do at the federal level? And I know Wendy went through a couple things, but really, John Boehner has already talked about at the federal level some of the cuts that they can make in dealing with it. First of all, dozens of big corporations don't even pay taxes. General Electric, Verizon, and Boeing paid no federal taxes last year. None. Apple, Google, and Microsoft avoided $80 billion in taxes in this country. The richest 1% get, on average, over $270,000 in tax credits a year. We can't cut our way out of this, but we can close these loopholes where corporations pay their fair share, where wealthy individuals don't get $275,000 in tax cuts, where we come up with an agreement where new tax revenue is offset by some of these cuts, and we can put ourselves in a decent position. Because what happens at the federal level when they make these sequestration cuts or these mass cuts to the non-defense discretionary stuff is it falls on the states, it falls on these legislators, and then those pressures increase some of the other federal program needs that are going on. So at the same time you have Governor Kasich wanting to expand Medicaid, the constant conservative rhetoric about making these drastic cuts will put more pressure on the state of Ohio and affect the state's bottom line. So we have a perfect storm here that is headed toward this Statehouse and toward the Capitol in Washington, D.C. And that perfect storm could lead to the wealthiest 2% of this country continuing to not pay their fair share. Elimination of things like the income tax at the federal level and the state level, and more pressure on middle class and poor people, and more pressure alternatively on both state governments, local governments, and even the federal government's other programs to try to make up for this difference. Because out of rhetoric, they talk about cuts. What they're really in essence doing is taking needed services that are going to fall through gaps and filter out, and somebody's going to have to take care of it. Because we are a nation that takes care of its own. So therefore, what we are calling on this Congress and this Statehouse to do is to stop playing rhetorical games and to find a way to do common sense legislation both in Washington and here in Ohio where we stop playing games with the tax rate. We deal with the revenue problems as well as the cuts in an even way where we eliminate and create some fairness in the tax code for corporations and wealthy individuals. And at the same time, we take care of our problems here in Ohio's budget so we don't create more problems for local governments and other governments to try to solve. Otherwise, all you're getting is a lot of rhetoric and a pass-the-buck mentality to another government entity, and we are in an endless cycle that we will all pay for, and probably pay significantly more for as people don't get health care, as people don't have food, as people don't get their education over years and years and years and years. This is a crucial point in American history. I know people often say that and use that. I do not. I do believe when it comes to tax policy, both in the state of Ohio and at the federal level, the next few months will be crucial to the future of this country and the future of our economy. And I will end with this, as I say to every audience that I talk to, whether it's around Ohio or when I was in Washington, the more money you put in the hands of people to spend, the better our economy is. The more money you put into the hands of somebody who is wealthy, who is not going to spend it, they're going to invest it, the more you have a Wall Street recovery rest of this nation stagnates. That has been the lesson in Washington and Ohio over the past few years. It is time to get fairness into the tax code. It is time to make sure that money is in the hands of consumers and not in the hands only of investors. You can still make money, you can still be wealthy, but you can pay your fair share.